things before we start. Let's look at the cables first of all. This is all composite video that we're running. Even though this cable is actually a component cable, we're only using one of them, so we're only doing composite. It doesn't really matter what color the cables are; they're all the same thing. I mean, they're not. All the cables are essentially the same. If you use 3 on component connections, you're doing component video. But if you take like if the cable's yellow, red, it doesn't matter. It's just if it's going what it's going into. They're actually all the same thing. People label these so that you know that you keep your signal straight. We're going to do everything here in composite video because this mixer is composite. It doesn't do component. The video synthesizer will output component or composite. So in terms of this, we're going to talk about composite video. Everything is on one cable.
So that's the mixer, that's the synthesizer, sorry.
Yeah.
So can I just ask not the composite, the component? It has 3 there, one for the 2 for lights and 1 for color, 1 for light and 2
Well, okay. So the component cable has. If you look at a component cable, this is one here. Right here. One's connected. We got red, green, and blue. It's cool for you to know this, although we won't really be using this in class. But the green carries the luminance and green. The red carries red, the blue carries blue. When you have a composite cable, all this is on this. Just all on one. Program out.
So is that the same thing, or at least the same rationale, if you have a VHS player and you've got like the 3 cables that run out of the back of it?
If you have a VHS player that outputs component, then you've got component video. If you have one that outputs composite, then you're using one cable and it's composite.
Yes,
So most VHS decks are composite unless they're pro decks, like one of these guys. This isn't VHS, but a big pro deck might have RGB outs, component outs. RGB is actually different than component, but I won't even get into that because that's like a whole other thing. I mean, we can get into that, but we don't need to get into it right now. We're going to be dealing with composite video. Another thing to know is this is called an RCA cable. Okay, it's probably what people are used to seeing, especially like this yellow, thin, crappy thing. Everybody's probably seen these things, like to watch like some old videotape or something. You know, if you grew up long enough ago, you might have had them in your house. Now, probably not. People aren't really doing stuff with them that much for like, commercial video. It's the same kind of idea. It's still composite video, but we call it a VNC connector. This is considered a professional connection. It's more reliable, better resolution. It locks on. So if you want to come from back here, you can see it in person, but I can show you maybe on here if it's easier to see. To connect it, you rotate this little indent here. Kind of rotate until it goes on, and you twist it up. So that way it'll come out. This thing is just like, oh, it's out, It's part of the reason that people use it. Okay, so the things that we're working with right now, CRT, cathode ray tube in here with 3 guns, red, green, and blue. The back of this is, when I was talking about using the raster display, there's yokes on the television. We can't do it on this. It's not set up. It's just the color. We have a video mixer here, which is not exactly like the video mixer in there. It's much more simplified. It's like A/B. So, for example, let's put bars in the top row, and we have the video synthesizer on B. If I pull this up, got it, right? Like, it's pretty simple. Color bars, I just pull them up. I can make it anything. It's not, this is like built-in generator for color. I put the color bars. And so we have like wipes, like we do in the mixer, circle wipes. It's a wipe here. See if you want to take a close look at this MX50. Any analog stuff we'll be doing in here, we'll be using this Panasonic MX50 as our mixer for the analog signals. This is all SD video, it's not HD video. It's different than what's in there. It's 480i instead of 1080. So we're talking about a 4:3 size video, not 16:9. lower resolution. To get it into the switcher does something that's called upscaling, where it's taking that image and essentially stretching it, multiplying pixels. Anyway, the point is that it's getting it up to be in HD. Because it's doing that, you'll notice that some things are going to distort shape a little bit because the sizes are not the same ratios. You know, SD videos, they're both rectangular, but one's a lot more stretched out than the other one. One's like a landscape view, or one's compared to the other one.
Is
So-
there a way to like letterbox the size?
Normally they're not in the switcher. The switcher wants, so the switcher in the control room wants 1080, so it's going to make it fit that. That's the only way it's going to take it. So when we do stuff out here, what I was trying to get happen here before, but I guess the thing's not on the monitor anymore, was so that we could see what's happening in the control room out here. The box is not attached to the television, so we can't do it. But if you look inside the control room right now, I believe, so you see that what we're sending out comes into the control room. It's coming on channel
sorry.
17. You guys all see it up on the top. So to do that, we have to go out from here through this converter. This little Black Magic makes these. A lot of companies make these. We're using these. It's called a mini converter. It's just taking the analog signal and changing it over to SDI, which is what the switcher wants, which is a digital signal. So it's making this analog signal digital, sending it into the input here, switcher in. This one, I guess, goes in on 17. That's how Peter's got it set up. I'll plug that into here. So you want to go. Okay, so here, this is where the component thing comes actually again, because if you look at this box, you're going to see Y, BY, RY. That's component actually, not RGB. So we're using composites, so we're going to go into this Y or NTSC. NTSC is the American standard for SD video. PAL is the European. Same idea, except one has a little bit more lines than the other one and runs at a different frequency, 60 versus 50 hertz. It doesn't matter, it'll be set up to do NTSC. So you just go out from your mixer into here, SDI out into the board. What we were trying to make happen, and which we will make happen eventually, probably for next week, is that we will take the output of that and send it back to there. And then that is going back to here. And then this is going back to there, and that's going back to here. So this now essentially turns the studio into a feedback loop.
Does the digital have to go analog?
Yes, yeah. So you have another box that's doing, which is actually over here. It's not working right now. Could be for one of a couple of reasons. Which one yet? But this is the reverse.
But you could do just from analog to analog to analog to analog to analog.
Not
there.
to there.
Not to there,
Yeah.
but,
But we do that here when we have a feedback loop, which is this. So got the signal on 2. On channel 1 here, what I've done is I've taken the output of this thing, this mixer. This comes with 2 outputs. We can make more outputs by going like through the television and out the television again. But essentially we're taking the output of this. Which one do we use? Just want to see which one we actually use. Okay, so we just went straight. Yeah. So we took the output from here, and we put it into channel 1. So it's on channel 1, we pull it up, we get that out. That's a feedback effect. You put it inside of a circle wipe.
so you put channel.
Is the synthesizer creating the initial?
Yeah, the synthesizers, and we're gonna get to that
Okay.
too. This diamond shape is being generated by this video synthesizer, not the switcher. The only thing the switcher is doing is mixing the signals just like the one in there does. It doesn't generate anything except, you know, when we make it do bars and stuff. But other than that, it doesn't generate.
So the feedback is just the instability of itself. You're not doing anything to it. And so insofar as the visual change, it's just its own instability.
It's its own regeneration, yeah, until it like basically it's still regenerating, but you don't see it as much. If you colorize that, I don't know how all switchers kind of handle feedback a little differently, and actually like my MX50 handles it different than this MX50 for whatever reasons. But if see. So we can colorize the feedback quite a bit. The Panasonic series is pretty good for colorization. I mean, for feedback. We can position that wipe with this positioner up here. So, the size of it is, well, it's really just a wipe, so the size of it's being controlled by the T-bar, but you're seeing a circle change. If you want to change that shape, you just keep hitting these wipe functions, so it's like more oval, diamond, square.
And you had first to colorize inside the shape itself? The
No, well,
light?
this is just the raw signal out of here,
Oh,
and,
okay.
and when we have it patched right now, we can make it very colorful, but we're not right now.
I see.
This is the feedback being colorized, and the colorization channels are here. So if you look at this part, it says color correction. You have A and B.
Mm-hmm.
A, we've made A the feedback, and we made B the synth. So we're doing it to A. If I turn it off, you see it's going away. We can change the chroma levels, so we can dial the amount in. We can shift this around, this color wheel, to try to add, variation to the image. We can negative the feedback.
Yeah.
We have effects.
Sorry. Just got excited.
Yeah, so I mean, this is where so what you have
Now we're
here,
talking.
what you have happening here is like kind of a double feedback. The switcher wasn't like, they didn't make the switcher to do that, but it's able to do that because we're sending it a feedback loop, and now we can process the feedback loop. So what we're doing always is like we're creating systems and we're processing elements of those systems, and however we have a lot of possibilities here, like for manipulation, depending on how you patch things together.
So and this loop is generated by how you wired the back there.
Yeah, and like we're talking like really basic right now. Like this
Like
is
you
like
just-
we just basically took the output of this thing and just put it back into itself. Took the output. There's two outputs in the back of this mixer. It's the same thing. It just gives you two doubles, so two copies of it. 1 and 2.
And you're toggling between pure signal and then the feedback loop itself, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two.
Because it's like it is the same thing because its output is whatever is on the screen. I mean, so like what it's outputting is this diamond is the feedback.
It is the feedback.
That's why feedback works, because it's outputting feedback
The same
on top of
thing.
it's feedbacking feedback because that's what it sees the image. I mean, feedback's not like this essential thing. It's just a system. Feedback's not an image. Feedback's a
Right.
system. So
So are you like you're taking it out of the output and putting it into the input of the machine?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
That's how they're labeled.
exactly, and that's pure or direct feedback.
Okay.
Whereas you'll see feedback where people put a camera on the television, and it gets kind of a different result. You have more of a tunneling kind of effect, which it's really just a rephotography process or a rescanning process. And so adjustments to the camera or defocusing the camera, anything you do to the camera, things you put in between the camera and the screen, will change that because you're really just taking a picture of it. You're making it. It's actually like the image.
Right.
This is the same. It's just really regenerating its signal, so it's more of an electrical process, as in like nothing's being rephotographed by the camera. Does that make sense to
Yeah.
everybody?
Yeah. So
You
that's
can combine those two techniques and do
You
get
can go first.
wilder things to happen.
right.
You start throwing mirrors in there with cameras, and
So what are like this diamond shape, like you say on the
Mhm.
farther screen over there, is that image itself generated by feedback? The
No.
diamond shape, or where is that coming from? Or is
well, we're
that-
gonna get to that next.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's a whole other like barrel
Okay.
of monkeys or kettle of fish or whatever you want to call it
Okay.
here.
Quick question before we go into that.
Yeah, we're not even getting to that yet, but you go ahead.
When we were in there and you were going, media A versus media B, and we were switching between the two with the Star Wars gear thing.
Uh-huh.
In that case, you had two different signals. In this case, they're both exactly the same signal. Is that right? Do I have that right?
No, you still have two different signals.
So why
They
is the
are
feedback-
discrete signals. They just look the same because.
But is the feedback loop on both of them, in other words? Are both feeds the feedback loop? Because you're switching between two things, it seems like. That's why the wipe is happening.
Well, this is kind of the essence of feedback. It's like a recursive process. I mean, technically they're two different signals because I have to have two different cables going at two different inputs. So
That's
if you
all I'm
ask, if you
asking,
say
okay.
that to me, I'm going to give you the proper answer and say, I know what you mean,
Yeah.
but I need to say to you, I have to tell you the truthfully, no, you have two different signal paths happening here. That's why it works. But what it looks like, yeah, it looks like the same. I mean, you're sending a copy of it, but feedback, if it was a direct exact copy and there was no delay,
Okay, I got that. And the reason I'm asking
there was no
that-
delay, it wouldn't work.
And I'm trying to get to the next question, which is instead of plugging right back into itself, is that the equivalent of a bus return in video? In the same way
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean, I
have it
guess
in
so.
audio.
In a way.
Okay, that's what
Except,
I'm
you know,
trying
I
to
mean, a bus, usually you can assign a lot of things to a bus.
Right.
So, I mean, you could do that if you have two mixers kind of like connected to each other, like maybe, you know, when people did open reel tape experiments and made tape loops between two tape machines. I'm talking maybe in audio terms,
Yeah.
because I know how to work with audio. You could extend tape loops over two machines and kind of double the feedback and dubbing effects you could do. So,
But instead of sending the out directly back in input, like you said, it's a really elementary loop.
Mhm.
Could you send it back into the input of something else further down the chain that's recombining with something else, in other words?
Something
and then bring it back in
And then bring
here.
it back in.
Yeah, you would affect, and we could do that. I mean, I
Yeah,
could
it's
send the
kind of
output of this into the television and then take the television out, because this monitor is a production monitor, so, you know, when you get with your input, you get a direct output also on that same channel. So if I take the output and put it in the TV and then take it out from the TV and put it into here, you'll see a slight variation in the feedback. It's only like one stage, so, you know, that all depends on like electronics on TV. So everything's kind of like, well, that's the other thing about analog is like the hardware does matter. Like certain capacitors, certain ICs, certain, like all these things, they're different in each machine, and you're going to get kind of like different results. You might get different results in the same mixer, depending on like how crapped out a capacitor is somewhere on the board. Like you never kind of know. We're not talking about like digital information where it's kind of the same every time. It's either like the same or it's broken. Like in digital, you know, it kind of is like on or off, 1 or 0, or you know, you can shuffle them around, but then it's not the same thing.
So if this was CBS News, it'd be a nightmare, but if it's art school, we like their right?
Yeah, well, but I mean, they use these kinds of techniques. I mean, these techniques, a lot of techniques developed by artists, but they also, I mean, engineers as artists, you know, and these techniques came from experimentation in the studio, a lot of it, you know, and were used in weird ways in production, television, still can be. Why are we doing analog at all? Well, now when like, you know, you have a computer and you can do things in here. Well, reason number one is you can't actually get the same kinds of things in a computer. You can get simulations of it. There's no way to get the same thing. So there's things a computer can do that obviously this cannot do, and kind of vice versa. There's an immediacy to this process where, you know, as she moves this handle, it's happening. We didn't say like render the feedback effects and then like drink a coffee and then come back and like it did it. So, you know, if we're doing things in real time, we're working in a physical environment. So when I talk to you about putting a camera here and like sticking a mirror in here and then like turning it, like you can do all these things and get results you can't really ever anticipate getting, like weird things happening. You know? So what we're trying to have happen here is to get a little familiar with some of this stuff and kind of like hybridize, mix the two, bring analog and digital and back again. You know, there's no reason to work inside of just one or the other combined.
Is this equipment, sorry if I missed this part, but is this your equipment or is this equipment?
This is not mine. I have this mixer, but this is not my mixer. This is Peter, Matt, Scott was using it, but it's the mixer that's going to be here.
It's yours.
This is
Peter
mine.
Jackson?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing: is it? Well, I am trying to get them to get this, and it's been taking far too long. It should have been here already, but Hunter is said that they will get modular video equipment for the studio a little bit, and hopefully keep getting it if people are interested in it. So it may be as soon as next week. If it's not, I'll bring it back in again. But
So
I would hope I hope they do get it, so I don't have to keep bringing my stuff.
Wedding videos with that.
Yeah.
Is it Peter's or is it like in the studio that we can use? Like, is it his personal?
It is his personal, but he
leaves it here.
donating it to the class.
Gotcha.
So, like, as far as digital effects are concerned, like, are they basically, are they designed to mimic these effects? Like, they're not, like, this is actually dealing with a signal, like a wavelength.
Yeah.
Digital effects, it's more like reading a form, like an equation. Is that a
Yeah, I
good way
mean,
to
well, a
think
digital
about it,
effect
or-
is, you know, some digital effects were created kind of in the mindset of things that could be done digitally, and some digital effects are kind of made to approximate things that were done in the past through analog means.
Okay,
I
so
would say. So I mean, a digital effect is, you know, it's a series of operations in a binary system. So you just have like a, and you can adjust the presets. You know what I mean? Like you can't.
yeah.
You have limited amounts of adjustment unless you're a programmer.
So in that artist that you showed, like, was he who said was dealing with the composite line of video?
Which one?
Shit, do you guys remember?
Scott Bartley.
The making of Offhand piece,
Not
or the Matthew Schlanger,
maybe the Schlanger.
the Lumpy Banger.
Oh no, not the Lumpy Banger.
The one that was
Shit.
showing the synth.
Oh, the Scanime.
No, sorry
What about
guys.
The black and white one.
There was like a really, I don't know if you talked about some artist that was it seemed, I wondered if he was hacking the composite line in, since that was like a digital, that would mean that the material or the machine was a digital machine, not. Do you have any idea what I could?
I'm not sure. I think
Okay,
the terms
sorry.
are getting mixed up, but we could definitely like look at it and I can
Okay.
sort out whatever the confusion is.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
it's not really like a. The only, like, I'd say that the most hacking thing that we looked at was things that were manipulating the raster of the television.
Oh, okay. So maybe
Whereas, like, if I
think
took
I
this cover off of
misunderstood.
here, which I don't recommend anybody does because you can kill yourself, there's a big, vacuum tube on the back of this, and so some of the processes we were looking at, like the wobulator effects, even things in the Scanimate, we're using, I mean, not this exact, these didn't exist, but I mean, the same idea, oscillators, outputting electrical signals through an amplifier to raise it up to a level needed to be, and then attached to the yokes that are literally on the television tube. So an electrical impulse is like warping the image, like blank, blank, like left, like we're changing the x-axis or the y-axis or the z-axis. We apply enough of a rate, we can make things roll, but this is all happening on the tube. So it's not something that you can, so in a way that's hacking the television. You're making the television do things like electrically that it's not really supposed to do. It's not legal. You're not like sending it like a video. What it wants to do is refresh the rates the way it's supposed to.
So what we're
Okay.
seeing now, is this just
What are we even on now?
just the regular, the first one? The
This
first,
is this.
This was just okay.
It's just that outputting. And we're
It's
going to get
just
to
that
that in a minute. Yeah. But before we do that, I just want to show you a little bit more of the mixer real quick. So, because if you're going to use it, you might want to know how to use it. These effects banks basically work the same way as this A, B. So if you click on A, I apply any effect to the A channel. I do a paint effect, some cheesy posterization kind of stuff. I can make it black and white. I can make it mosaic. And these levels are adjusted with this dial size here and level. Level doesn't apply to mosaic, just size, I guess. There is an effect that is the strobe. You see a slight, it's not really here. See how it's kind of slowed down in a weird way? It's like it's the level of the strobe. If you had something moving across the screen, you'll see it a lot more. There's a thing called a trail, which just brings it in like that.
What's the still?
Still just freezes it.
Just freeze it.
Sweet. What did I do? There we go. Okay. So yeah, there's basically your effects. There's a thing called a. Let's get something that's like. Oh, I guess it's just feedback. Okay, it's feeding back the way. All right. Anyway, so that's that bank and the downstream. So you have keyers in here too. You have a Luma keyer. The keyer. One thing to know about the keyer in this is that it always applies. It keys out the B bus.
B.
If you look at the keyer section here, it says B.
right in here.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, it's not like they're a board where you can like apply the key to whatever you want to
You
apply
just
it
go
to.
to the B.
We're talking like way simple. This is called an AB style mixer. The other one's called an ME style mixer. AB is just like A and B. In this case, the way they design this, you key out B. So if I don't want to key that signal out, I better pull something else up on B. But in this case, we're going to key out B and we're filling it with feedback. We're doing a luma key, so we're taking out the brightness levels because we have a black and white image, so we're not going to see that much if I chroma key it. The slice knob, just the level of what we're keying out. Okay. If I, 1 second here, put in some color. We got some blue happening there. Turn the colorizer off. Okay, so if I chroma key now with the feedback, this hue knob here, RBG, it's like a color wheel. It's telling me which color I'm keying out. So we're going to go to blue. We'll adjust the level, and then we key out the blue. Now this applies to, it doesn't need to be this, obviously, guys, it could be a camera, it can be anything you send into it. One thing we're going to bring in here, which I did not bring today because my arms are too full and we just weren't going to get to all of it, is another camera, which is not one of these cameras, which will be an SD camera, and which will be a tube-based camera. Tube-based cameras are not CCD cameras, they're not sensor cameras. They actually operate similarly to how this television operates, where they have a red, green, and blue gun inside the camera. Differences that you'll see is the image. Well, first of all, the camera needs a lot more light. Its light responsiveness is not as fast as any camera you would use now. These cameras we're talking are probably like, you know, since the 50s until 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. I think they're really making YouTube cameras after that. Its light responsiveness is slower, so if I aim it at a light and move it, I get a trail. I can get like a line of light. Think of it like a tube amplifier compared to a solid state amplifier. You know, the tube takes a minute to warm up. People say it has a warmer sound. The responsiveness is like a little slower and more gradual. The same thing applies to those kind. We'll see that when I bring one in.
Is that how
There aren't any here.
Is that how they did the after image stuff with the fan
On Bartlett?
Yeah.
It's not how they did it. That was feedback, but they did use tube cameras too, and tube cameras with feedback do kind of provide this like kind of more 70s softer kind of like look. Yeah, it does, because it's like a slower response time. So I mean, that was kind of a combination of things. Yeah, but yeah, they definitely had a feedback.
That's
loop
what
going there.
it's not what Norman McLaren used.
Well,
You know,
Norman
the-
McLaren did a lot of
the
film-based
duet is
animation,
film,
like
right?
directly on the film
Yeah,
too. So
it's on the film.
early television cameras were all tube-based. TV cameras, like all cameras, were kind of tube-based for a long time until like the early '80s, and then even still, consumer cameras were tube-based. The tubes got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. There's a lot of different kinds. So Saticon, Vidicon, Plumicon. We don't need to know all that, but if you're interested, I can talk about it for a long time. I love tube cameras. Okay, so and that's that, and then we have this DVE here. So what do we have going into the DVE? So the back of the DVE, what this thing does is kind of like what I said earlier, that the DVE, what we have in there, where we can fly a box in, we can send any signal. The beauty about this thing is that it's in real time, and then it'll take like analog signal paths. So I can send a signal into here and then output it back into the switcher, which means that I can position it around the screen. I can spin it in a 360 degree. This is a digital process, by the way. What we're looking at, we're using an analog signal path, but this isn't all analog. Like this is digital mixer. It's got a microprocessor in it. This is definitely digital. It's sampling parts of the image in something called a frame store, so imagine the thing takes a picture of the image and then constantly refreshes the next one. So it's how it can save something and move it across the screen. So it's a digital process too. So we're mixing processes already, even though this all feels like it's analog, because the actual video signal that we're sending out we're passing analog signals through digital processors. That, on the other hand, is a purely analog process, actually, and we'll look at that after this. So if I have, what do I have going into this right now? Let's trace it back. I forgot what I sent to it. mean, I can pull it up, but I wanted to see it actually physically. Is it just the synth? It might just be a synthesizer. It is. Okay.
I think so.
And then the output is going into 2. So that's what we got up here. So we actually have it on live right now. So that's this diamond shape here is actually not just this going to the mixer, but first we've routed it through here and then we sent it to the mixer. So which means that we can hit the position size and shrink it. We can hit the rotation and spin it. We can move it like this. We can move it through space. We can add a trail onto it. We can do things like there's some preset functions that have been programmed in here. So if I pull it, what's one that I don't know. We can adjust parameters on all these.
So is that de-interlacing it, sticking back?
These are just video effects, basically. I mean, these are like, it's just like telling it computationally, like, this is a digital process where it's like, take the image and pinch it here and do this to it and move it here. This is a cylinder shape. You can't see it so well until I shrink it.
But for example,
I can spin that around.
the trail.
I can add the trail and spin it around.
We like the trail.
You can send feedback to that instead of the video synthesizer. So you can do what could you do? You could the output. So now the video synthesizer should be on 1. We have diamonds up there?
Yeah.
Okay. What do we have here? Oh, we got feedback. So what I did was I took the output of the mixer and put it into this thing instead. So I could,
So you took the out.
yeah, so I could do things with the feedback. So if I limit key that, if I limit key that signal into the other one, so we got these kinds of things happening. Then we can rotate that in space. If we get the angles just right, we can have them go infinitely. We can spin them. So basically what we've got here is like, a kind of computerized or manipulatable, a version, like imagine a camera aimed at the television on a 360-degree mount. It's kind of what we're doing here with the signal, because we are resampling the image. So essentially this is like working like a camera. It's just an internal camera. There's no lens involved, but it's taking a picture of the image, sampling it, and spitting it back out. Yeah, it's a frame store. It's called a digital frame store, or there's a thing called a frame buffer. It's kind of the same idea.
Wait, this is outputting to itself and then coming back in.
Well,
That's
no,
what
it's
the
just literally,
relation-
so what's happening right now is that the mixer's output is going into here, and this is going back in. So what we've done is a feedback loop, but like kind of what you were talking before, but we've extended it and applied an effect to it and brought it back. It works really nicely with this because now you have the same image, but you're able to keep the feedback happening at a longer delay, but move it around. So this is like loads of fun, especially when you start keying this into things behind live video, add layers of keying. So anything that we have here should be going into the control room behind a live camera, which it is.
But when you're manipulating, you have such a familiarity with the thing that it feels like you can anticipate a little bit what's happening.
Yes, because
While-
I'm used to doing it.
Right. While I'll be like, oh, I like this.
Well, the more you
No.
get to know the stuff,
you get
if
to
you're using it all the
anticipate.
time, then you already, I want to do that, and this is how I get it.
Okay.
I mean, there's always an element of chance. I mean, it's like, the difference between analog and digital, and I mean, this is digital too, but dealing with like electrical components that like aren't always the same every time is that, I know that I want to get that effect, and I kind of got
And
the
you kind
effect,
of
but
know.
maybe if I did it another time, like the color might be slightly different or something. It's not going to be always exactly the same, but it's pretty much the same, Yeah, I mean, essentially, you understand how the system is set up because you're making it, so you know how to get what you want. But there's a lot of involved in always still of just experimenting and playing.
Well, because it's also contingent upon the type of image you're working
Yeah,
with,
for
right?
sure.
So I mean, if it was not that
Right,
box,
would
it
be
would not
complete-
look
right,
like
but
a
he
cool
could-
trippy space thing. You know what I mean? I mean, it would still look trippy, but it would be. A
No, but
different-
he, like, if you know, yeah, but he can anticipate what he's doing in terms of movement,
Right,
right? In
right.
terms of,
But yeah, so the DVE is basically it's a 3D positioner manipulator. And because we have the mixer, we can, I mean, right now I'm bringing it on a Luma key. If we bring it on a Chroma key, we probably won't have too much of a difference, but let's just. I mean,
You're
we're
just
doing-
cutting that thing off hard and turning it back on. That
Yeah,
might
that's
get
kind of the
upset.
quickest way to reset it, actually. I mean, you can, it kind of gets to a state, and there's not like a reset button that like returns everything to 0. So I just, this top panel here is the control panel. This is the actual thing. This is just a controller for it. So when you
Turn it
turn off
on.
the controller and back on, it tells this to reset because it lost connection to it. So it just goes back to 0. That's the quickest way I've found to reset this thing. I think a lot of this times, you know, people, you can program these, but it's like we're using a tool that is out of date. These are things that you wouldn't do on this the same way anymore. Well, A, because it's not passing a HD digital video signal, but B, because essentially it's doing keyframing, which is something you would probably do like in, you know, editing programs or After Effects. You can do it, you know, all this stuff. So, but we're able to do it with like live video signals because of this. So that's why I'm using it.
Technical question. So in the video that we watched with the dancers, and the dancers had superimposed like nothingness or the color or whatever, it was not their physical representation or whatever. Is that done because, I mean, when I saw that, I was like, oh great, if I want to do that here, I got to put all my dancers in blue suits. But in fact, I don't. I can just do the Luma key kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, you
Would
can
that
get
work?
kind of similar results with the King. I mean,
Okay.
it's going to be kind of more of an off, no pun intended for that piece, but off-on kind of
Right.
thing where, I mean, you'll have a little bit less. If you have like like chroma keying, you're probably going to get like, it's probably going to work out better for you than Luma key. If you need just a hard edge on it, Luma keying is totally fine. And Luma keying will do gradation, but with the chroma key, I think you have a bit more flexibility to dial it in.
Got it.
Luma keying, yeah. But both will work. I mean, they're just essentially doing the same thing. One's just based on the luminance levels, and one's based on whichever color you told it to isolate.
What's more fun is you get the other one, you got to dress everybody up as blue unitards and stuff.
Oh, well,
Awesome
yeah,
fun.
or I mean, green.
Saturday night.
right?
I mean, some of the things he was doing there too, though, I mean, weren't just Luma keying. I mean, some of them were layering of other layers. They did a lot of dub downs in that mixer too. So, and then he was saying that, like, you know, they were rephotographing and then like dubbing again and dubbing again and dubbing again. We have like 4 key, like a switcher in there that takes 4 keys, so you can kind of get around this. You can do a lot of it live in a way because you can stack keys on that switcher. So you could have multiple. You could have a Luma key on 2 and like a Chroma key on 3 if you wanted, and like layer them on top of each other. You could make some kind of key happen in here and bring that in and layer that on top of it. Matthew did a really good piece with dancers actually in the last class we had of this with a dancer, sorry, which you guys actually should check out if you haven't seen it. Just use a lot of these kinds of techniques and it came out really well. All right, so we've looked at the mixer. Anybody have any questions before we even get into this thing? Anything? Any questions? There's a curve thing too, by the way. Which, well, yeah, draw on the edges of. There we go.
What's that?
Curve. Moving this joystick up and down moves the thing up and down. Moving it left and right controls the angles of the curve.
How would you
Do
achieve
you-
a delay?
Yeah.
Achieve a delay.
Yeah.
What kind of delay? Like
Like-
just multiple image.
Yeah,
Delay?
like say you're, I guess you can't.
You have to. The best way to do it is to chroma key it out and send feedback to it. So chroma key feedback in, and regenerate a live. Like say if I had a live camera.
You had a
This is
camera.
why I was trying to get the camera to come in here,
Mhm.
but now it won't. So we have to try to get that for next week. I don't know why. I think maybe either I do need to bring a scaler here, or that output's not working. I'm not sure. I've talked to Peter, but
essentially, yeah, I wanted to bring a camera, one of these cameras into here, chroma key it here. But, so yeah, so you would put a feedback loop into it. And we'll have the same image as somebody moved their hand, you have a regeneration of the image. Chroma keying works the best for that.
I'm assuming we can also do that with the SD camera that you have.
You can plug it into here, yeah. That would be,
Or I have a VHS camera. Could
to
I
bring that,
also- Yeah.
if you want, for sure. Yeah, if you wanna bring that, that would work great. Yeah, and then, I mean, if we can, you know, yeah, and if we can get the output of the control room, we can send it to here. The only thing with that is that you're gonna have a weird situations because you're sending the output to here, and if you bring this back at the same time, what you've made is a feedback loop, so, you know, you're not gonna like, they'll see what happens. It's like you have like feedback on feedback, and depending on how you position it in the mixer in there, you can make that work for you. You know, if you key that out, you can have lots of layering happen.